All right. Welcome back to the How to Relate podcast. This is a solo episode on how to understand and handle conflict. This is stemming from work both professionally and what I see in couples, and also personally in what I kind of hear around from people who struggle in conflict and feel like they really get stuck in it. So, how do we even begin to understand conflict when we feel like we're stuck talking about the same topic over and over and over again? So oftentimes it's we get stuck in a topic and then we're struggling with we can't figure out what to do if we're on the same page or how we unload the dishwasher. And it's typically not about unloading the dishwasher. It's typically not necessarily about the household chores. It might be something underneath. It might be a when I feel like we're not in a partnership around the household chores, I feel alone, or I feel unwanted, or I feel some sort of core wound. We're going to deep dive into a few things here. We're going to deep dive into your core negative image of both yourself and your partner, the vulnerability cycle, how to begin to understand conflict, and how to repair effectively. And I'm going to give you rules and guidelines for each. So let's dive right in. Terry Real, who is a famous couples therapist and wrote a book called Us that I highly recommend to people, talks about the core negative image. So, the core negative image is when you are in a conflict, what is the story of your partner that comes to mind? And what is the story of yourself that comes to mind? Okay. So, if there's an example like, I see you as someone who is selfish, irresponsible, and doesn't want to do anything to help out around here. And the other person is going, I see you as controlling, critical, and demanding, and like I can't ever meet your standards. So if these are the core negative images that a couple might have of each other, then when an argument happens, the core negative image is going to be fighting against one another. It's almost like we have these avatars that we switch into, and that's the part of us that gets caught into conflict. So, the core negative image, if you think about this in three ways, okay? The worst version of you in my head is, the worst version of how I see myself is, and the image that comes to mind when insert conflict, okay? So, if the worst version of you is that you are cold, critical, demanding, and I can never meet your standards, then I'm going to see that worst version when we are in conflict. I am now already filtering you through my own fantasy blown up image of you. Now, sometimes couples might say, but I do feel like that might be true of me. I feel like that I can be critical. I feel like I can be irresponsible. And what I, the core negative image isn't based necessarily in whether it's true or false, but that these are qualities we might actually see inside of ourselves. We might actually see the like, yeah, I can be irresponsible sometimes, or yes, I can be critical sometimes. And that is going to be the version of us that does come out. And when our partner sees those worst qualities that we don't even like about ourselves, then we're going to get defensive about those qualities. And we might even say, oh, you think I'm critical? Then you're irresponsible. And we know what those core wounds are for each other. Okay. So if you think about the core negative image, it is based in these are qualities that I don't necessarily always love about myself. And they're qualities that get blown up and exaggerated when we're in conflict. So keep this in mind as we, and if you are watching this, there are slides. And I'm going to do my best to talk this out without any visuals. So if you're listening, that you get the full image with my voice. Okay. All right. Next, we have, again, Terry Real. We have the relationship grid. Okay. So health is at the center. And I want you to imagine that there are four quadrants. On the top is grandiosity, which is one up. At the bottom, there is shame, which is one down. To the left is walled off or avoidant. To the right is boundaryless or love dependent. So in the top left corner, where it is grandiosity and one up and walled off or love avoidant, someone's strategy might be to be indifferent, passive aggressive, and say, you're not worthy, or internalize as, I'm not worthy. To the right, where it's grandiosity one up and it's boundaryless, it's control and anger. So it's an invasion. My anger is now an invasion into your territory. And you might see explosions, someone might throw things, it might be really hurtful language, however that might look. To the bottom left, walled off and shame, resignation, withdrawal, and a depressed sense of self. That if I'm so withdrawn, that I'm so internal, you can't access me, and I can barely access me. Then to the right, we have boundaryless and shame, and desperation and manipulation may be the tactics used. So in manipulation, it might be you don't love me. You only see the bad in me. Oh my gosh, I made you feel so bad. It's all my fault. Now I'm taking over by saying my feelings are so big and I feel so bad that you now have to caretake for me, even though I may have been the one to hurt you. If at the center of this, okay, because I think that these, again, they're quadrants, and these are sort of the exaggerated versions of how we might get defensive and how we might fight. Okay, on this slide, there is an infinity loop that my pattern feeds into your pattern. And I want you to imagine that there is a dotted line down the center and across this infinity loop that separates one person's pattern from another, but the infinity loop is the part that feeds into it. So if you think of your pattern, and you might do this by thinking about a situation where you've had conflict with your partner recently, and think about your reactive response. How did you react? What was the actual immediate reaction? Then think about the story that you told yourself about you, about your partner, and about the relationship. That core negative image may come into play here. That if you're always critical, then I'm saying that you're the critical one, you're demanding, I can never do right by you, and you're the one that's irresponsible, you're the one who is lazy and who is selfish and doesn't seek to understand me. Okay, so think about the story that's coming up for you in this conflict. And this is sort of I'll preface this is sort of a post-mortem exercise. This is not something you do in the moment. This is something you do after an argument when you're regulated, that you can start to understand your patterns and to really hone in on how to work with them. So, first step, conflict. What was the situation? How you reacted? Your response, the story that you told about yourself, your partner, the relationship. What were the feelings? What was the felt sense in your body? What was your emotional experience? Was it anger? Was it loneliness, confusion, desperation, anxiety? All of these can be circling in conflict that can induce negative reactions. What are the vulnerable emotions that are underlying all of this? And if these vulnerable emotions are what you're fighting for, it's love, belonging, togetherness, safety, care, comfort. And often what we might be experiencing are the loneliness, the hurt, the anger, the frustration. That those are common emotions that we feel in the moment. And those ignite our threat responses. So in emotionally focused therapy, the model and Sue Johnson often talks about how there's a pursuer and withdrawer, and that the pursuer is going to use reactions such as being critical, really pursuing someone, get back here and fight with me, you're not walking away from me, how dare you? Like those kinds of terms are someone who might be more of a pursuing pattern. Someone's in a withdrawing pattern is I'm leaving, I'm out, get away from me, I need time, I need space, I'm shutting down. That might be a withdrawing pattern. So you can see how these ways of coping are reactive strategies to how you're feeling. And what you might be feeling underneath is a lot of times if you're in a pursuing pattern or you use those strategies, what you're trying to say is, I don't want to be alone in this feeling. And a lot of times when someone's in a withdrawing pattern, what they're doing is, I need to self protect. So if you understand how your strategies are really trying to protect you, they're trying to protect your core human needs. We all need to belong. We all need a sense of self esteem. We all straddle the I have a sense of self and a sense of belonging. And often those will come up in conflict between two people. Also, it might come up insecurities you have about your connection. So when you envision this visual, you have an infinity loop, you have your dotted lines, and at the top, you might have the insecurities that you have about your connection. And the situation that occurred is going to trigger those insecurities. If the situation is, I walked in and once again, the dishes weren't done, the insecurity might be, once again, I'm doing this alone. Once again, you're not attuning to my needs. Once again, this is a story that I'm having about how we're disconnected. So, this is a great exercise to do on your own and then sharing them with a partner. But you can really start to understand how your patterns are feeding into one another and might actually be igniting one another. So, now that we have an understanding on the reaction and emotions and the core needs to conflict, what I'm going to give you are basic rules for repair. My golden rule for repair is put your shit aside. What I mean by that is if you're fighting to be right, if you're fighting because you feel like that you have to have it your way, that you're so afraid of being alone, that you're like really pulling the other person in to say like I need you, I need you, I need you, and you're clinging, or you're pushing someone away and basically stonewalling them and going like I'll never come back and this is a form of punishment. Like you really have to put yourself aside, okay? It's not easy to do, but you can do it. If you're an adult, you can do it. Take ownership and accountability for your part, even if it's 2%. Your part might be, I noticed that when the dishes weren't done, I noticed that I really was critical of you, that I yelled at you, that I told you that you didn't care. I told you these stories about you that maybe I was, angry and feeling in the moment. These things, right? Take ownership of your part. And there are no buts. The next rule is seeking to understand. Seeking to understand is not the same as seeking to agree. A lot of times, what I hear for couples is when they seek to agree on something so quickly, what they're looking to kind of see is to be right. So if you can see it my way and agree with me that my way was the right way, we're good. And that's not what understanding is. That understanding is actually seeing where the other person is coming from. That is why the first rule that I have here is putting your shit aside, because that is actually taking your thoughts, your feelings, and going, I'm going to literally put them to the side of me. It's not to say we're not going to get to them. It's not to say they're not going to be listened to. I will be able to share my piece. But right now, I'm going to listen to the other person and take their side in. There is no blame, no shame, no reliving the argument or fighting for, again, rightness or agreement. And also, you don't have to fight for a conclusion. At this point, it might be that we're talking about something like, do we move? Or where do we send the kids to school? Or, what's the new job going to look like, right? Like it could be things that are a little bit more um, like bigger topics, have a lot more context to them. So before it's, are we fighting to conclude something? You kind of have to go with, well, what do we need to understand about each other first before we can get to that conclusion? So you're still in the let's investigate each other and see where we're coming from phase in this. And do not relive the argument. If you start bringing back up things that the other person said in the argument and going, but you said this, therefore, and I said this, therefore, it's going to reignite a flame that you're trying to put out. So be a firefighter, not a fire starter. Um, you can have differences and be on the same page. You can have differences and be on the same team. Your differences are most likely also complementary. The parts of us that draw us to someone are often the parts of us that drive us crazy. He was the one who was always the planner and kept it all stable, but then I feel like he doesn't hear my feelings or my emotions because he's the logical one. She's the one who was always spontaneous and open and talking about her feelings, but then I feel like it's a lot to hear and she always wants to talk about it and it's a lot for me to handle, right? So it's like the parts of us that draw us in are often the parts of us that drive us crazy. So when you're in conflict, if you can start to maybe see what is the quality that is showing up right now that originally drew me to this person that I might be just overdosing on at this point in time, right? Like it's like how have our differences complemented each other? So if you can start to think about why I'm in this with you in particular, it's going to be a lot easier to repair when you're coming from a place of there is a reason why this repair matters to me. And it's not just because of our relationship, but it's also because of who you are. And I chose you as my partner and how we do complement each other. All right, how to begin to make a repair. All right, make an attempt, and it can be messy, it can be clumsy, it doesn't have to be perfect. It can be that you make eye contact, it can be that you touch each other's hand. It could be through humor, but I will caveat the humor has to be light. It cannot be sarcasm, it cannot be deprecating, it cannot be a jab. It can be that, you see something funny happening with that's on TV with one of your kids, with something on the internet, whatever it might be. Listen without defenses. If you start to notice your defenses are one to come up and show themselves, it is in your jurisdiction to hold your feelings. Okay. So there is going to be some self-soothing practices happening. I'm operating right now under the assumption that since we covered the rules in the first or the slide before this, that the person that you're talking with is going to be coming with their vulnerable feelings. I'm going to assume that because you are listening to this podcast, that you have done the work and that you're going, okay, I want to be able to talk with you. I want to be able to share my side with you and where I'm coming from. And I'm not going to blame or shame you or criticize you. Okay. So if the other person is not doing that and you are able to hear them and listen to them, and let's say you might have defenses coming up because you might feel guilty or shameful about some of the things that you've done. And that is human. Congratulations, you're not a psycho or sociopath because those are very human emotions that work for us. Hold your feelings, okay? If you start to go in to the I am now hearing you as something that I did wrong, and now I'm feeling guilty or bad, and I need you to take care of me, that invades someone else's space. You're invading someone else's boundaries, emotional boundaries, and then you're taking the attention back onto you. So if you can listen without defenses and truly hear them from their point of view, you're going to go a long way. How to do this? I want to feel more connected. Okay. So start with what it is that you want. And if what you want is to feel more connected, I want to feel like we're on the same team. I want to have some space so I can be more present. I want, it's starting with here is my goal in this. My goal is not to hurt you. My goal is for us to be able to work together. My goal is for us to be a couple and for us to love actively with one another. So if you can share what it is that you truly want when you're in the vulnerability cycle and you're doing this, part of that cycle is understanding your core wants and needs that your strategies are trying to get you to. When your strategies are, I am being critical or I'm being defensive, or I just want to not feel alone in this, or I want some space and I want to feel regulated, I want to feel calm. Like these are all things that are indicating to you, hey, you have a need right now. And your survival strategy is I'm going to help you get to that need. So if you can come back and you can say what it is that you need and what it is that you want and how that is also going to benefit the relationship, then you can start to talk about ways that you can work with the conflict. And of course, what is not on the slide, but I will say, making an apology. Okay. Well, it is on the slide, but really want to hone in on making an apology. Making an apology is a very genuine looking someone in the eye. Maybe you take their hand. It is a full body attunement of, hi, I am so sorry that that's how I spoke to you. I want you to know how much you matter to me. And you can take that line and just let it land. You don't have to keep talking. Over explaining actually creates more anxiety between the two of you. So you can just take one apologetic line, let it land. Let your emotions breathe in the silence between one another. And that's it. That's how to handle conflict. So I hope this helps. And if you have any other topics or things that you want me to get into, let me know. I am always open to suggestions. So until next time, everyone, stay connected.